أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين. ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون. ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. صدق الله العظيم.
I greet you with the universal greeting of peace and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We pray that the COVID-19 pandemic passes and all those who are ill, the Almighty grants them total shifa. Ameen. We should use this pandemic for us to get closer to our Creator and not further, and never forget that as always, Allah knows best and we never question what He has ordained for all of us. Ameen. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, I am genuinely humbled to participate in this virtual gathering with all of you today at the Claremont Main Road Masjid on this Friday and present this nasiha as this weekend marks the 51st commemoration of the martyrdom of our leader, Imam Abdullah Haron radiallahu anhu, on the 27th of September 2020. My nasiha today is broken down into three parts. The first will deal with the high-level overview of apartheid-era killings. The second is to give you some status reports of the reopening of inquests and other investigations that are currently being conducted. And thirdly, what is the significance of reopening this inquest in a democratic South Africa? Now let's start firstly with just a high-level overview of the modus operandi of the apartheid-era killing machinery. There were numerous massacres that took place. The most famous, that of Sharpeville and Nanga in the early 60s, and that of the Soweto massacre in 1976. The regime also resorted to the hanging of many political activists. The names of John Harris in 1965 and Solomon Kalushi Matlangu in 1979 are just some of the activists who were hanged. Relating to deaths in detention, there were a total of 73, commencing in 1963 with Lux Martin Luli, and this continued until 1990. The apartheid regime also resorted to assassination on foreign soil, and the names of Olof Palme in 1986 and Dulcie September in 1988 come to mind. They used bomb attacks killing the likes of Joe Kabi in 1981, Ruth First in 1982, Jeanette Skoon in 1984, and Bekim Langen in 1991. The South African Defence Force conducted numerous raids in neighbourous countries, again killing many of our activists. The Matola raids in Mozambique in 1981, Maseru in 1982, and Botswana in 1985 are just some of them. Then the regime also resorted to careless acts of assassinations and killings, such as the Trojan horse killings in 1985, the Guguletu 7 killing in 1986, and that of Ashley Creel in 1987. Then there were operations that were deemed, to have gone horribly wrong, but information at our disposal today clearly indicates that they could have been booby-trapped. The names of Colin Williams and Robbie Waterwich in 1989, that of Yusuf Akalwa and Prakash Napir of the Ahmed Timol unit, also in 1989, and then the killing of Anton Franch in 1989, among some of the others. The regime then also resorted to the use of askaris, who were responsible for killing of many of our comrades, including third force hit squads that were sponsored by the apartheid regime. Now, if we look at just specifically deaths in detention, almost without fail, the official explanation of all these deaths of political detainees was either by them committing suicide, by hanging, or by jumping out of the window. Alternatively, it is that they had slipped on a bar of soap. Dear brothers and sisters, respected elders, let us never fool ourselves that apartheid was real. It was never a figment of one's imagination, and the racist apartheid regime was responsible for killing thousands of its opponents within the boundaries of South Africa, including foreign soil, and they operated with impunity. This is something that we must never forget. Now, if we deal with the last portion of this Nasiha, what is the significance of reopening this inquest in a democratic South Africa? And this is a question that is often posed to me as to why am I pursuing something that transpired many, many decades ago? And my response to this and many other questions is very simple. Let's just start firstly with the fact that this is our history. And if we don't record our history, firstly, it's possible that nobody will do so. And if somebody decides to record our history, it will be distorted. And this will put great risk at the great integrity of our heroes and our heroines and our martyrs. It's also important for us not to accept the apartheid-era inquest findings, that held nobody responsible for the deaths of our activists. We don't need to accept this. Nor do we need to accept the fact that the ruling party in a democratic South Africa and the democratically elected government, has failed to investigate more than 300 TRC cases in a democratic South Africa. We don't need to accept it. We can do something about it. And that is why, the reversal of the Ahmed Timol inquest findings in 2017 is highly significant. If we did not contest this, the reality would have been that history would continue to reflect that Ahmed Timol committed suicide. But the reality is that because we confronted this successfully, history will now reflect that Ahmed Timol was murdered in police detention. It's also important for us to preserve the legacy and memories of our martyrs. Not just preserve them, but also they must serve as an inspiration for us in a democratic South Africa. What it will do is that it will instill work ethics in our conduct, in our day-to-day behavior. And this should seek as a means of empowering us, to build a new South Africa that, that we had all yearned for. It will also allow us to steer away from a sense of entitlement and privilege, which then ultimately leads us to levels of arrogance and the rampant looting of state resources and coffers and corruption that we see that is pandemic, across all sectors of South Africa, also all facets of our lives in South Africa. And this is something that is absolutely despicable. It's a grim reminder that the blood that our martyrs had shed had prevented them from witnessing the birth of a democratic South Africa. They had not lived to vote in a democratic South Africa. And this is something that we enjoy witnessing on a day-to-day basis in a democratic South Africa, despite the fact that we have numerous challenges. But the reality is that we live in a democratic South Africa. It is very painful to state that many activists and comrades have become too comfortable and are simply in their comfort zones. And by us bringing back the matter of reopening of inquests, bringing back the legacy and the memories of our fallen heroes, our heroines, our martyrs, makes them very uncomfortable, as they don't want to be reminded about their brothers and sisters, who are in the trenches with them. And very painful for them, to give answers, to the many families out there who've lost loved ones and who continue yearning for truth and justice in a democratic South Africa. And this is something that they yearn for. Many of them are elderly, and in their lifetime want to see some form of truth and justice, and to hold those accountable for for killing their loved ones. It is important for me to state that the aspect of truth and justice is something that drives me, that stimulates me on a day-to-day basis. And on this particular basis, I continue pursuing the matter of reopening of inquests, not just for Uncle Ahmed, but for many other families as well. What we also find today is that we find many of our former oppressors and many within our ranks who were oppressed have now formed new forms of alliances. And this ultimately is put together in a form of business entities in terms of business ventures, that they generate huge amounts of revenue, for self-enrichment purposes. So previously, during the apartheid regime, our enemies were not clearly visible. It was difficult to identify them. But now the reality is that our enemies become very, very difficult to identify. During the apartheid regime, we knew that the apartheid regime with its collaborators were our enemy, and we had to destroy them. We had to bring their reign of terror to an end. But today it becomes much more complex, because we find a situation that those in political power, unfortunately, also are not serving our interests. And I think this new alliance explains their apathy in dismally failing, to support many, many families that are seeking truth and justice for the killing of their loved ones. It is unacceptable for us to selectively remember our heroes and our heroines and our martyrs. We've become too comfortable to selectively remember them during elections, during the conferring of awards, posthumously, renaming of streets, schools, etc., anniversaries. And it cannot be that we selectively remember them, have selective amnesia when it's comfortable and convenient to name drop them. But when it comes to the issues of finding truth and justice and holding their killers accountable, we have social distancing from them. Our heroes and our heroines, our martyrs, must become an integral part of our lives, so that they inspire us to improve the living conditions, not only of ourselves, but of the poor, the marginalized, the unemployed. And this is practically what the struggle was all about. It was not just about a selected group of individuals. It was improving the lives of the citizens, about the people of this country. And this is what was embodied in the Freedom Charter: a better life for all its citizens. And this is something that must never be forgotten. It is important to note that my journey to reopen Uncle Ahmed's inquest, to find out more about his life, has brought me into contact with many, many other families throughout the country. And this interaction with them has resulted in us grouping together under the banner of the Apartheid Era Victims Family Group, where we as a collective continue mourning and grieving collectively, not individually. We continue commemorating the anniversaries of our loved ones. And more importantly, we've put out a list of demands as to what we want to see in a democratic South Africa, and how this will enable us to obtain truth and justice, for many, many apartheid era families. Now, my plea goes out to the musallis of this Claremont Road Masjid in Cape Town, that we humbly appeal to you that continue remembering us in your du'as, continue assisting us commemorate and celebrate the anniversaries of our heroines, our heroes, our martyrs. Continue reaching out to the people that you are connected to, whether they're members of parliament, different political parties, their business entities, powerful business people, NGOs, that you reach out to them. You bring it to the attention of the apartheid era victims family group that is fighting for truth and justice for our apartheid victims. And you in that particular role, can continue to assist us, and inshallah to enable that in a democratic South Africa we get truth and justice for every single one of our heroes and heroines who were martyred by the racist apartheid regime. In conclusion, respected elders, brothers and sisters, my journey formally commenced in 1996 after listening to my grandmother Ma testify at the TRC hearings. And when I made a sacred vow that I was going to do something about it, I've put a lot of effort and energy many, many years later, to continue the sacred vow that I had made. And with the grace of the Almighty, I published my first book in 2005. And with his intervention and his support and his guidance, I've recently published my second book titled The Murder of Ahmed Timol, My Search for the Truth, which explains my journey, puts into context that Uncle Ahmed's arrest was not purely by chance, but that it was an orchestrated security police operation to take him into custody, details of his detention, his torture, comparison of the 1972 inquest to that of 2017, and also to give a glimmer of hope to many, many other families that, inshallah, in this lifetime, that they will find truth and justice for their loved ones. So I look forward, inshallah, in the new year, that once this pandemic passes, that, I can visit all of you in Cape Town, and inshallah, Allah permitting, that I visit you in the Claremont Main Road Masjid, and perhaps give this nasiha to you again. And also would like to thank you for inviting me to present this nasiha. And what an honorable honor for me, to link this particular nasiha to the commemoration of our leader, Imam Haron Inquest. And I just want to once again thank you for the invitation, greet you with peace and love, and say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم اغفر لهم وارحمهم وعافهم واعف عنهم وأكرم نزلهم ووسع مدخلهم واغسلهم بالماء والثلج والبرد ونقهم من الخطايا كما ينقى الثوب الأبيض من الدنس اللهم لا تحرمنا أجرهم ولا تفتنا بعدهم واغفر لنا ولهم وللمسلمين أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.